When I think of joy, of joyful moments in my life, a memory comes to my mind, a memory from about 10 years ago, when I was deeply and utterly heartbroken. Some of you may think, what does heartbreak have to do with joy? Isn't heartbreak the opposite of joy? Others might think heartbreak would have been a much more suitable topic for a worship service right now. Some of us, because we're tending our own broken hearts and wish to see our pain acknowledged, shared, so that we may carry this burden together. And many of us, because we feel so heartbroken for the world right now, for the wars that keep devastating many parts of this world, for men, women, children displaced, hurt, dead, grieving, for environmental destruction, human-made climate change, and the more and more natural disasters, the more and more frequent natural disasters that come with it and cause so much loss, so much pain, like the recent fires. We are heartbroken because of the news we see every day, news that fill us with fear and sorrow. We are heartbroken because it might feel like we have lost our country. The place we called home suddenly feels upside down, and we wonder, what happened? Can this be true? But how? What happened to goodwill, hope, and solidarity? There are many, many reasons why our hearts are breaking just at this moment. And yet we're supposed to talk about joy? Yes. Today, right now, we will talk about joy. Joy and the ways it might actually save the world. A tall order, I know, and yet something I deeply believe in. And maybe by the end of this worship service, you will too. We'll see. What exactly is joy? Is it just another word for happiness? In his book of joy, which he co-wrote with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu differentiates between joy and happiness, stating, joy is much bigger than happiness, and adding, while happiness is often seen as being dependent on external circumstances, joy is not. Joy is something that comes from within us, even though it can be triggered or incited by something around us. According to the Dictionary of Psychology, joy is a primary emotion that we are genetically predetermined to feel. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama declares that feeling joy is not just a goal in life, but it is actually our reason for being alive in the first place. So joy, experiencing joy, is a central aspect of our human experience. The philosopher Michaela Summa further differentiates joy from other emotions like happiness, stressing the importance of mindfulness and presence. She says, joy is not only a direct emotional response to an event, but it is also tightly bound up to the present moment. Whereas happiness presupposes an evaluative stance concerning one period of one's life or one's life as a whole. This part gets at a really important aspect of joy. In order to be happy, we need to be more happy than unhappy. ideally for an extended period of time. Not so with joy. What makes joy so immensely precious and powerful is that we can feel joy even in times of deep unhappiness. We can feel a moment of joy even in the deepest sadness. When our heart is shattered into pieces and our best friend finally enters the room and envelops us in their arms. At the deathbed of a loved one who, for one last moment, opens his eyes, looks at us, and smiles. At a funeral, when a memory is shared that suddenly brings a long-lost past into our present moment. We can feel glimpses of joy even when we are sick, even when we are sad, even when everything seems lost. Even in the depth of darkness, joy can find us, and if it's just for a moment. Maybe that makes it all the more precious. There still and always will be joy in this world, and it is for everyone, even when it is buried in struggle, even in the midst of heartbreak. The Archbishop Desmond Tutu adds to this point, discovering joy does not save us from the inevitability of hardship and heartbreak. In fact, we might cry more easily, but we will laugh more easily too. Perhaps we're just more alive. Yet as we discover more joy, we can face suffering in a way that ennobles rather than embitters. We have hardship without becoming hard. We have heartbreak without being broken. The time that I mentioned when I was so terribly heartbroken a few years ago, the kind of heartbreak that weighs on you so much that every breath seems like hard work, I absolutely didn't know what to do with myself. I remember sitting in my car on the way to the supermarket, crying, just as I had cried all day at home, had cried in my bed when I woke up, cried in the shower when I finally got up, cried standing in front of the fridge when I noticed that I had run out of milk. When I got to the supermarket, my face blotchy and my eyes swollen, there in front of the entrance was a couple sitting on the ground who had each other and therefore wasn't heartbroken, at least not in the way that I felt heartbroken, but had nothing otherwise. No place to live, no money, no food, who surely had their own heartbreak to deal with. And so I went into the supermarket and still crying, but not quite as much anymore. I started throwing all kinds of stuff into my cart, delicious food that didn't require a kitchen to prepare, fresh fruit, chocolate milk, deodorant and fresh socks, even rose-scented hand cream. I spent almost $50, which at that time was an immensely huge amount of money for me. And I stuffed all these things into plastic bags, went outside and almost defiantly placed them at the couple's feet. And I saw surprise on their faces, and then joy. And then I quickly left because I had to cry again. But this time it wasn't the crying that accompanies heartbreak, but it was the kind of crying that happens when we suddenly deep inside feel that quiet, buried joy again and realize that not only is there a way out of the sadness, but we may as well just have found it. Sometimes when we are heartbroken, it is caring for others, tending to someone else's heartbreak, creating joy for someone else that leads us back to our own joy as well. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, calls this wise selfishness. He says, foolish selfishness means you just think only of yourself, don't care about others, bully others, exploit others. In fact, taking care of others, helping others, ultimately is the way to discover your own joy and to have a happy life. So that is what I call wise selfishness. We live a more joyful life if we not only share joy with others, but we cause it for others. If we create joy in the world. In that way, joy not only improves our lives, it improves us. It causes us to be better people, to care more deeply and more actively for others. And ain't that something? But still, enough to save the world? The author, Zadie Smith, describes how dangerous joy really is. For that which brings us the most joy, that which we love the most, also carries with it such great potential for loss, grief, and devastating heartbreak. She says, children are the infamous example. Isn't it bad enough that the beloved with whom you've experienced genuine joy will be eventually lost to you? Why add to this nightmare the child whose loss, if ever happened, would mean nothing less than your total annihilation? It should be noted that an equally dangerous joy for many people is the dog or the cat. Relationships with animals being in some sense intensified by guaranteed finitude. You hope to leave this world before your child. You're quite certain your dog will leave before you do. Joy is such human madness. Joy and the ever-present possibility of loss that joy contains is human madness. And yet the fear of loss does not stop us from continuing to fall in love, from continuing to have children, from continuing to keep and love dogs, cats, parakeets, and rabbits. It just makes us take really, really good care of them. How would we care for the world, for humanity, if we could love them just as much? If we enjoyed them just as much? Maybe we just have to be more joyful, to actively seek more joy in the world that surrounds us, to seek more joy in this country, and then also be so afraid of losing it, so afraid of the resulting heartbreak that we set out to save the world. And to be honest, many of us already fear loss, great loss. And many feel so very heartbroken right now by the state of this country and the state of the world. But often we lack the joy that shows us the way out. So to find the way out, we need to look for where the joy is. And then set out to protect all which brings us joy. And share the joy with others so they can join in. Be utterly and abundantly joyful together, because creating a sustainable and just world is a group project. We cannot do this alone. This is not about individual superheroes who single-handedly make a change. This is about interdependence, about connecting, about doing this together. And joy is really the most amazing form of interdependence. Joy wants to be shared. It thrives on being shared. We love sharing our joy, but we also love sharing in each other's joys. Maybe you've been in a situation where you were so happy, so full of joy that you had to hug the person right next to you, or you had to call someone on the phone to share your joy, and then the other person too experienced joy, maybe for exactly the same reason, Or maybe because simply witnessing your joy caused them joy as well. Or think about the moments when one person started laughing and suddenly everyone joined in until the home room was in stitches, wiping away tears and gasping for air together. Joy incites more joy. It pollinates. It grows when it is shared. In that way, joy is inherently interdependent. And joy turns us into the best version of ourselves. It makes us kinder and more patient, more generous. We can laugh at ourselves and forgive more easily. It makes us lean into interdependence more fully. In good times, but also times of struggle and hardship. Maybe especially in times of struggle and hardship, even during the most dire conflicts. In the Book of Joy, Bishop Desmond Tutu recounts a time when, shortly after the atrocious genocide happened in Rwanda, he had to give a speech to an audience made up of both Hutu and Tutsi in an effort to forge reconciliation, an almost impossible task. Tutu addressed what had happened, but he began the speech with a very gentle joke. A joke. And the audience laughed. Hutu and Tutsi together. And so a door was opened that made it possible to overcome hatred and begin the talks that could make the long road towards reconciliation possible. There's a difference between making light of a serious situation in order to avoid it, to avoid talking, and creating a shared moment of joy so that we feel a sense of connection and can then tackle it together, interdependently. Because the problems we are currently facing, we cannot solve alone. The poet Ross Gay writes, "My hunch is that joy is an ember for or a precursor to wild and unpredictable and transgressive and unboundaried solidarity. And that solidarity might incite further joy, which might incite further solidarity, and on and on. My hunch is that joy emerging from our common sorrow might draw us together. It might depolarize us and deatomize us enough that we consider what in common we love. And though attending to what we hate in common is too often all the rage, noticing what we love in common and studying that might help us. It's why I think of joy, which gets us to love, as being a practice of survival. Joy that drives us to preserve what we love so deeply. Joy that unites us and builds solidarity. Joy in which we take care of ourselves by taking care of others. Joy that improves our lives and thereby improves us. Joy that sometimes rests deep and quietly within us and shows us the way out of sorrow. And also joy that bubbles up from within us, that is contagious, that makes us laugh until we gasp and reminds us in our breathlessness that we all breathe the same air. This joy is a practice of survival. But I believe it is not just that. I believe it might also be what saves us. It might be what we need to save. Let me do that again. But I believe it is not just that. I believe it might also be what saves us. It might be what we need to save ourselves and each other and the world. May your lives be filled with joy, and blessed be.